tell us more about that?
Yes, I mean, I would say that her speech on Pakistan also is again significant because there is a tendency in a part of the Western media to club India with our neighbors, like whether it's Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. And we often hear this common refrain: the situation in India is pretty much like it is in Pakistan in terms of the economy and in terms of the freedom or the human rights. Where she's pointing out is the fact that two things. One is in Pakistan, the Muslims over there, the majority population over there, are not getting the benefits of governance. There's an economic downturn. People don't have jobs. Basic daily necessities are not available to them. That's one. And the second is that a minority over there, the Hindus, they too are being targeted. So the human rights violation takes place in countries like Pakistan, not in India, where every government scheme does not get differentiated on the basis of religion or caste. Is actually meant for everyone. And the Indian government and the Prime Minister himself, according to Nirmala Sitharaman, stresses on inclusive growth.
We have TMC's Majid Memon joining us. Sir, good morning. So, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has slammed the Western media for its perception and has also highlighted the fact that Muslims in India are safer than Pakistan, in fact. What are your views on this?
Well, I welcome our finance minister's concern about Indian Muslims, which she has reflected by her statements in US. But let me correct her that, well, if you want to have an honest test of how Muslims are being treated in India, they should not be compared with what is happening in Pakistan. Pakistan is a country of turmoil. Pakistan is not a democracy to which Indian lifestyle or Indian way of growth is to be compared. So we must ignore Pakistan. Let us have an independent assessment of Indian Muslims. I appreciate that, well, Muslims are growing in number, Muslims are growing in their business as well. But then I think some journalists should have asked a question to her when someone was concerned about 200 million Muslims in India, that how is it that her party does not give Muslim representation in Lok Sabha, in the highest parliament, highest lawmaking body? And how is it that you are ignoring Muslims? You don't have a single Muslim representation. So Muslim empowerment in the current regime of which he is a minister is indeed lacking. You must include Muslims, give them opportunities to serve the nation. They are very much as much patriotic as you are or anybody else is. And therefore, Muslims don't have to simply criticize the government for sake of criticism.
Shehzad, so Majid Memon has welcomed Nirmala Sitharaman's remark that Muslims in India are safer, but he has also said that she shouldn't have compared Muslims in India with that of Pakistan, and also he has said that BJP does not give enough Muslim representation in Lok Sabha. What would you like to say on this?
First of all, there is an ecosystem that tries to create a narrative of Islamophobia that prevails in this country, which doesn't really exist. If you see any of the flagship schemes of the Prime Minister, Awas Yojana, Kisan Yojana, Mudra Yojana, or any other Yojana, you will find that minorities have a share of 30 to 35%. Is that discrimination? When a toilet is built and 11 crore toilets have been built, it has been built for Shilpa, Sultana and Sandra. Is that discrimination? The fact of the matter is that no less than 6 major Muslim countries have given the highest civilian honor to Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Are those Muslim countries doing it against the interests of Muslims? Because this question is raised on the front of by many of these so-called countries, and they say that look what is happening to Muslims in India. So therefore that question has to be contextualized. That look at the situation of Muslims in other countries, including Pakistan, including say Sudan, including Iraq, Iran, and look at the position of Muslims in India. And therefore that comparison has to be made. Now, addressing Mr. Majid Memon's question, these days Mr. Majid Memon is in TMC. Previously he was in NCP, which is an ally of the Congress. The Congress party has still, from starting of Lok Sabha to right now, has given only 5% or 6% representation to Muslims, and that to one particular community amongst the Muslims, not to the Paswandas. The population of Muslims is 14%. Why haven't they given it to commensurate to their population?
Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, currently on an official visit to United States, has made a stern remark against Western perceptions against India. Speaking at the Peterson Institute for International Economics, discussing the resilience and growth of the Indian economy, said that the investors should should the country on ground instead of relying on pre-built Western perceptions. She also added that the Muslim minority in India is
Hello, Namaskar. This is First Post and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Cases of Wuhan virus are rising in India. Masks and advisories are making a comeback. Meanwhile, the home country of the virus continues to stir trouble. China may be building a spy base in the Bay of Bengal. India has officially taken up the matter. On the Himalayan border, there's no easing of tensions, but India has a new trump card. The Americans are sharing real-time intelligence to preempt Chinese provocations. Beijing is mighty upset about this. Tonight, we'll bring you the details about this intel sharing between India and America and also look at history. They weren't always partners. There was a time when the US backed China against India. We'll discuss that. In Israel, another protest rally has thrown up fresh problems for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. In South Korea, Google has been fined a hefty $32 million. And a new study shows how swimming pools for the rich are worsening the water crisis. The headlines first. Myanmar's military carries out airstrikes, killing dozens of people. A central town known for its opposition to the coup has been targeted. It's one of the worst attacks since the military seized control 2 years ago. Britain braces for unprecedented disruption to its health service. Junior doctors across the UK are on a 4-day strike over pay. More than 250,000 appointments and operations are likely to be postponed. Even artificial intelligence cannot escape China's scrutiny, it seems. All new AI products developed in China will undergo a quote-unquote security assessment. Beijing says AI-generated content must reflect socialist values and conform to state power. Punching Pooh patriotic badges are a big hit in Taiwan. It shows a Taiwanese black bear punching Winnie the Pooh in the face. Taiwan's Air Force pilots are also wearing these badges, which are a dig at President Xi. And a former CEO is suing Twitter over unpaid legal fees. Parag Agarwal, along with 2 other ousted executives, are suing the microblogging site. They're seeking compensation of over $1 million in legal expenses. All 3 of them were fired by Elon Musk. Tonight, we bring you the story of India's evolving partnership with the US. They have a common enemy in China, and they're working together to contain it. But it wasn't always like this. There was a time when the US trusted China to maintain order in Asia. The US saw China as the regional power and partner, and India as a country that must be kept in check. Today, the same America is counting on India to contain China. It's a fascinating story of changing priorities and power equations. We'll start with the latest. Tensions between India and China are rising. Beijing provoked India first. We told you about it. It renamed 11 places in the Indian state of Arunachal Pradesh. India responded by sending Home Minister Amit Shah to the same state. He launched a development program and declared, and I'm quoting, that not even an inch of land can be encroached upon. China slammed the visit. It said this will hurt peace. Meanwhile, Indian and Chinese troops remain locked in a standoff in Ladakh. Things could go either way. But India is better prepared this time. It has a wild card up its sleeve. India has the support of the US. Washington is sharing real-time intelligence with New Delhi. They're tracking Chinese soldiers. They're watching their movements and sharing all those details with India. So we have a 2-pronged monitoring system now. Indian troops on the ground and American satellites in space. And this is a very significant partnership, not just for India and America, but also for the world. How did it come about? Because the US finally sees China as a threat, and to deal with this threat, the US is making a decisive pivot towards India. Beijing is an aggressive power. It must be contained. But the US cannot do it without the support of regional heavyweights like India. So this is a partnership that suits both sides. The Americans are sharing intel with India. This includes satellite imagery. It maps out Chinese positions on the border. And this is all actionable intelligence. It's not a mere listing of possibilities. India can use these inputs and counter Chinese movements. This effort began in 2020, almost 3 years back. India and the US signed a pact. It's called the Basic Exchange and Cooperation Agreement for Geospatial Intelligence. I know it sounds complicated, but it is quite simple. It's about geospatial intelligence. It basically means intelligence about human activity on Earth gathered from space. So you gather images or signals or pictures from satellites to piece together what's happening at a particular location on Earth. And these are the kind of inputs that the US is sharing with India. The first indication of this came last month. A news report said that China tried to launch an incursion and the US was able to warn India in advance. So even before the Chinese could do something, India had a warning. These were real-time inputs. The Americans were telling India what was happening on the Chinese side as it was happening in real time. And this gave Indian troops time to prepare. They were able to push back the Chinese troops. This report came out last month, but the events happened last year in December. You may remember this, the border clash. It happened in the northeast, in the Indian state of Arunachal Pradesh. On the 9th of December 2022, Indian and Chinese troops came face to face. Thankfully, there was no violent confrontation. Troops on both sides suffered minor injuries and they disengaged immediately. But China was apparently completely taken aback by India's response. Reports say the strong defense by India, and I'm quoting, the strong defense by India caught Chinese armed forces off guard and enraged Beijing. US officials were asked about this report, about them helping India. They refused to confirm or deny. The official response said, and I'm quoting again, "We do not have information on this issue for now." Then the White House was asked about the same report. John Kirby issued a statement. John Kirby is the spokesperson for the White House National Security Council. He said, and I quote, "No, I cannot confirm that." So the same answer from both. We do not have confirmation. We cannot confirm it. Do you know why this is interesting? Because this is not a denial. And India is speaking in the same language, which makes complete sense because for intelligence sharing to be effective, it needs to be a secret affair. You need what they call plausible deniability. So that's how America and India are playing it. But it wasn't always like this. For the longest time, the US worked with India's rivals. In the Cold War years, America saw Pakistan as a useful partner/vassal state. Pakistan served as the middleman for the US-China détente. And in return, Pakistan was rewarded with military support. This was the great plan of President Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger. They engineered the US opening to China with the help of Pakistan. During the 1971 war, the US dispatched an aircraft carrier. It was called Enterprise. It was sent to the Indian Ocean apparently to boost the morale of Pakistan. As it turned out, Pakistan lost the war and Bangladesh was liberated. But Nixon reportedly wanted China to quote-unquote scare those goddamn Indians to death. That's what the US president said. And this policy continued for decades. I'll give you some examples. In the 1980s, China sold cruise missiles to Iran in violation of rules. But the US government resisted sanctions. It said the shipment was not large enough. China also sold missiles to Pakistan. But America did not act, saying the missiles were still in boxes and no one knew what was inside them. At the same time, the Americans kept sanctioning India for developing its space program. China was given a free pass to sell dangerous weapons and technology because all that America could see was its own commercial interests. And even now, it is US commercial interests that are driving a lot of its China policy. America supports India because it needs India's support in return. And India is working with the US because it suits India's interests. This is how geopolitics works. And for India, the China challenge goes beyond its borders. Our next story is from Myanmar, from the Coco Islands in the Bay of Bengal. They're close to India's Andaman and Nicobar Islands. The Coco Islands belong to Myanmar, and these islands are strategically located. Reports say China is trying to militarize them. Apparently, construction activity has already begun. There are satellite images They show 2 new hangars on the Coco Islands. There is also a new causeway, an accommodation block, a runway and a radar station. So is this a new spy base for the Chinese? It's hard to confirm right now, but Myanmar's close ties with China have raised suspicions. Some disturbing claims have been made. They say a surveillance post is being built on these islands and that China is providing assistance for this. Again, we cannot independently verify this, but we can tell you that the government of India has confronted Myanmar about this. Indian officials have spoken to Myanmar's military junta. They've shared the satellite images and they've sought an explanation. And what was Myanmar's response? They have denied any Chinese involvement. Myanmar has dismissed India's concerns. One of their major generals has called the reports absurd. In fact, I have a statement, this is what it says, and I'm quoting, "The Indian government already knows perfectly well that only Myanmar security forces are based there and they're doing defense activities for their own country." China has reacted too. It has called these reports sheer nonsense. But New Delhi is not buying any of it. India's External Affairs Ministry has issued a statement. It said India would take necessary measures to safeguard its interests. So no confirmation, but enough to suggest that there is a problem. As they say, there is no smoke without fire, and India has good reason to be concerned about this. A spy base at Coco Islands would be a challenge for India. A Chinese spy base at Coco Islands would be a security nightmare for India. It will give China a vantage point. They'll be able to monitor communications from naval bases nearby and even track missile tests in the neighborhood. And these fears are not new. They were first raised in the 1990s. That's when Myanmar allowed a Chinese facility on the archipelago. In the years that followed, China did not do very much here. There was no construction on the Coco Islands, but now that may be changing. Because Myanmar too has been changing. 2 years back, the military junta seized power in a coup. And since then, Myanmar's economy has been a complete mess. Economic growth has quote-unquote severely diminished. Not my words. This is the assessment of the World Bank. It came out last month. The World Bank says widespread violence, worsening power shortages and policy failures will continue to disrupt Myanmar's economy. So the most obvious question is this: where is Myanmar getting the money for the upgrades at Coco Islands? Is China funding this construction? It is Myanmar's largest trading partner, and it is known to use this leverage to gain strategic advantage from countries. Remember, China took away an entire port from Sri Lanka. Is China getting access to Coco Islands in return for keeping the generals afloat? We'll wait for more concrete details to emerge before answering that question. But here's what you should know. India is not out of the picture. While India supports democracy, it has not joined the West in shunning Myanmar. It has continued to engage with the generals. It maintains both diplomatic and military ties, including a relationship with Min Aung Hlaing. He's the current military chief of Myanmar, also the man who runs the country right now. India is talking to him, and despite the unrest, India is involved in development and infra projects in Myanmar. The idea is to keep a foothold and to not give a free run to the Chinese. But will a spy base at Coco Islands change all of that? How will it influence India's future engagement with the junta? Guess we'll have to wait and see. And we aren't done with islands yet, or China for that matter. The US is poking the dragon. We can give you 2 examples from this week. Number 1 is from the Philippines. It is conducting a military drill with America, their biggest ever. Now, this is an annual affair, only this time it's much bigger. It's the largest display of American firepower in Asia, and it is aimed at China. Number 2, the US has sent a naval destroyer. It came close to the contested waters between China and the Philippines. This is the USS Milius. It's a guided missile destroyer from America's 7th Fleet. It was seen patrolling around the Spratly Islands. This is off the coast of the Philippines. Both Beijing and Manila claim this territory, the Spratly Islands. The US warship came very close to the Mischief Reef. The Mischief Reef is a coral outcrop. It is part of the Spratlys. It is claimed by the Philippines, but Beijing has been controlling it since the 1990s. And they've built a base here. The Chinese have built a base on Mischief Reef. It's a base that is protected by missiles. The Americans came within a distance of 22 kilometers from this base. China saw this as a provocation. What does the US say? It says it is only exercising the freedom of navigation. But look at the timing. Just a few days back, the US angered China over Taiwan. It hosted Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen. We told you about it. She met US House Speaker Kevin McCarthy in Los Angeles. China kept warning against the meeting, but America went ahead anyway. And on Saturday, this is what a US official said in Taiwan.
We are doing everything we can in Congress to speed up these sales and get the weapons that you need to defend yourself. And we will provide training to your military, not for war, but for peace.
You heard him. Training a military not for war, but for peace. Typical twisted American logic. They're applying it with the Philippines as well.
The Balikatan 2023 is the 38th and largest ever iteration of this exercise, with roughly about 17,700 troops from the AFP, US forces, and Australian Defence Forces. It builds interoperability, enhances capabilities, and demonstrates mutual defense of the Philippine sovereign territory, and promote peace and security in the region.
Defense in the Indo-Pacific, protecting Taiwan from a potential invasion, reining in an aggressive China. These are all important geopolitical goals. But let's not kid ourselves and say all of this is for peace. These are essentially power games. A protester in the Philippines who is opposed to these drills described their purpose in a clearer manner.
Clearly, the war games are intended to project U.S. power in Asia. It's not intended to defend the Philippines. It's not intended to help the Philippines modernize. It's really intended to showcase U.S. power, and it is a preparation for war. So what happens after war games is that the U.S. is contemplating that the conflict will escalate. And now that we have more EDCA sites, or forward operating bases, the Philippines will eventually be dragged into that kind of conflict, which is not necessarily in our interest, as I said.
The US has been building up its bases in the Philippines. In February, it got access to 4 additional bases. So now they have a total of 9 military bases in the Philippines. The Americans have 9 bases. 3 of these new ones are in the northern island of Luzon. This is very close to Taiwan. It's the closest bit of land to Taiwan that is not a part of China. And one of the new US bases faces Taiwan. Another one faces the Spratly Islands. These bases are a win-win for both Manila and Washington. Let me explain. First, how do they help the Philippines? This is a territorial dispute with China, this region. The Spratly Islands. They fall in the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines, but China claims them. So having US troops around helps the Philippines. They can keep China at bay. And what's in it for America? A military base within striking range of China. That's what the US gets. So it makes sense for both sides. The Chinese, of course, are not too thrilled about it.
The facts are very clear. Out of self-interest, the US maintains a zero-sum mentality and continues to strengthen its military deployment in the region. The result will inevitably be increased military tension and endangering regional peace and stability. Countries in the region should think deeply about what is appropriate and what is mutually beneficial.
Beijing has been racking up enemies due to its aggressive posture. It is fighting neighbors to grab their land. India knows this. So do Japan, the Philippines, and Vietnam. And the US is taking advantage of these tensions. It is forming a ring of bases to hem China in. America is making allies, conducting drills, and flexing its naval muscle around Beijing's turf. Why? Because the US views China as the greatest threat to its world power status. It wants to limit China's influence. And why are China's neighbors going along with America's power projection? Because China is a regional bully. And some Asian nations think standing with a bigger bully is the best solution to keep the dragon in check. Now let's look at the most urgent domestic US problem, gun terror. Again. It happened yesterday. This time it was a 25-year-old bank employee. He took an assault-style rifle to work and went on a rampage. He killed 5 of his colleagues. Then he was gunned down by the police. And it gets worse. The attacker live-streamed his assault on Instagram. 9 people, including a 26-year-old police officer, have been injured. And this is a young officer. He just graduated from a police academy on the 31st of March. He was shot in the head. His condition is said to be critical. This is what the police and a witness said about the attack.
At 8:38, there's a report of shots fired at Old National Bank. Officers were on scene within 3 minutes. The suspect shot at officers. We then returned fire and stopped that threat. The suspect is deceased. This is the only time that I will mention the suspect named in this case. The suspect has been identified as Connor Sturgeon, white male, 23 years of age, who was employed at Old National Bank. His weapon of choice was a rifle.
An assault rifle, and just we heard a click, and the lady next to me turned around and said, "What the hell?" And then he just started shooting.
Describe that again. Everything that you saw.
He just started. He had a long assault rifle, and he just started. You hear the shots just start firing.
What did he look like?
I didn't see his face.
Were you in a meeting?
Yeah, we were in the back conference room. Whoever's next to me got shot, and hit bloods on me from it.
The investigation is on. The shooter had been associated with the bank for years, we are told. He interned there for 3 summers. Then, more than a year ago, he got a job at the same bank. Reports say recently he was told that he would be laid off. So yesterday, he walked into his workplace with a rifle, and during the morning meeting, he began his killing spree. He left a note behind for his parents. The police have found it. They've also asked Instagram to take down the shooter's live stream, the live video of the assault. And Meta, the company that owns Instagram, has said that it has complied with this request. The rest of the American system is going through the motions. Elected officials are offering condolences and lamenting the violence. President Biden is once again asking for strict controls on assault-style rifles.
Let's be clear about what this was. This was an evil act of targeted violence. And to add to that tragedy, a few blocks away, shortly after this happened, another man lost his life, and a woman was shot in a completely different act of targeted violence. The 2 incidents appear to be entirely unrelated, but they both took lives.
Today we saw another senseless act of gun violence, killed at least 4 Americans and injured at least 8 others, this time in Louisville, Kentucky. The President and the First Lady are praying for those killed and injured in the tragic shooting in Louisville and for the survivors who will carry the trauma for the rest of their lives. They are grateful for the LMPD officers who quickly and courageously stepped into the line of fire to save others.
Biden posted this on social media yesterday, and he's right. Too many Americans are paying the price for the government's inaction. U.S. gun terror has claimed almost 5,000 lives just this year, 5,000 lives lost in the first 3 months of this year. Here's more data. In 2023 alone, there have been 146 mass shootings in America. A mass shooting is where 4 or more people have been killed. America has seen 146 such shootings in the first 3 months of this year. 14 incidents have been designated as mass murders. More than 4,900 people have been killed. More than 8,800 have been injured. And this is just the first 100 days of this year. 2 weeks ago, we told you about the mass shooting in a school in Tennessee. And we fear we'll have more such stories to tell before the year is out, because these incidents are absurdly common in the US. And whether for personal gain or at the behest of the gun lobby, politicians are not acting against US gun terror. On to West Asia now, where Prime Minister Netanyahu's grip on power is still being tested. The Israeli Prime Minister is stumbling from one problem to the next. Last night, he diffused a crisis with his defense minister. But today, Netanyahu was confronted with a new problem. His cabinet seems to have rebelled against him. At least 7 ministers took to the streets. They led a mass rally. Thousands were part of this march, and cabinet ministers joined in. Do you know where the protest was held? In the West Bank. The crowd marched in the northern West Bank. It's a restive area. It has seen multiple incidents of violence in the recent past. The rally went up to a place called Eviatar. This is an unauthorized settlement outpost. It was evacuated by the previous Israeli government in 2021, so this is a really sensitive zone. What were the Israeli leaders doing here with their supporters? Apparently projecting strength.
Those who are strong in the face of terror in Eviatar will be strong in the face of terror in Tel Aviv. This is our statement here. We must be strong in the face of terror, both in Eviatar and in Tel Aviv.
We call it the big Eviatar march in order to impose pressures on the government to fulfill its obligation to build this settlement. It has become a symbol for many more Eviatarim to follow.
That's why the ministers took to the streets, and they're not the only ones who did it. At least 20 members of the Knesset took part in this march. Knesset is the Israeli parliament. These leaders went to back Israel's claim on the West Bank. It's an old dispute, among the oldest in the world, you could say. This is the West Bank. It's a chunk of land east of Israel. As of 2018, it was home to nearly 3 million Palestinians. But Palestinians do not control this land. Israel does. Since 1967. Israel has been controlling the West Bank since 1967. This was after the Six-Day War, a war in which Egypt, Syria and Jordan were also involved. Quite a miraculous win for Israel then. It routed all these Arab powers. They're all neighbors of Israel. It defeated all of them and took control of the West Bank. Then Israel allowed Jewish settlers to move in. So the region has always been a bit tense, but of late it's gone from bad to worse because Israel is telling Palestinians to move out. There have been reports of forced evictions. Palestinians have resisted. They want a separate state. They say the West Bank, Gaza and East Jerusalem should be combined to form the state of Palestine. Israel does not agree. There is tension and there's fighting. Israel has been conducting military raids in the West Bank. In the last 3 months, more than 90 Palestinians have died. Israel has suffered casualties too. Then last week, there were clashes in Jerusalem at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. One thing led to the other, and there were rocket attacks on Israel. Prime Minister Netanyahu does not want to be seen on the back foot. He's a hardliner, and he's had a difficult start to the year. He faced large-scale protests. He wanted to introduce judicial reforms. He basically wanted more power over the courts. The people of Israel protested, and how? Almost 500,000 were out on the streets in a country of 9 million. Israel's defense minister opposed the reform. Netanyahu fired him. Then he faced an even stronger backlash. So now he's reinstated the minister, ostensibly to not rock the boat when Israeli security is being challenged.
Regarding the defense minister, Gallant, even in the last few days, we were working together and standing together around the clock on all fronts in the face of the security challenges. There were differences between us. I've decided to put our differences behind us. Gallant stays in his position. We will continue working together for the security of the Israeli nation. During the Passover festival, I am telling you, Israeli citizens, together we'll stand and together we'll succeed.
So Netanyahu seems to have dodged a bullet. The move to reinstate the defense minister is a face saver. The prime minister's popularity has tanked after the fiasco. He's now fighting to hold on to his prime ministership. You see, Netanyahu rose back to power with support from Israel's extreme right leaders. In fact, experts have called this coalition Israel's most far-right, religiously conservative government in history. Now, those same hardliners were on the streets today in the West Bank, and they're demanding more anti-Palestinian policies. Will Prime Minister Netanyahu give in? His decision could have wide-ranging repercussions. Will he risk a conflict just to stay on in power? He does not have easy choices. Israel is dangerously close to another war. And now let's talk about what's happening in the world of tech. American big tech giant Google is in trouble, this time in South Korea. South Korea has fined Google $32 million because Google tried to eliminate a rival platform in South Korea. This fine is basically punishment for Google trying to establish a monopoly. And it's not limited to South Korea, this practice. Multiple countries have fined Google because it wants to be the only player in the business. Our next report tells you more.
Google tried playing a game in South Korea. It thought it could kill competition and get away with it. But South Korea's antitrust regulator caught the American big tech giant red-handed. Now, Google has been asked to cough up $32 million. Here's why the tech behemoth is being fined. It's blocked the release of video games on a competitor's app store. Why? So that the games would exclusively be available on Google Play Store. South Korea's Fair Trade Commission has accused Google of a lot, but mostly for using its clout to derail the business of a rival company called One Store. Google reportedly asked major game companies like NCSoft Co. and Netmarble Co. to release their games only on Google Play. It offered many of these companies a quid pro quo arrangement. Companies release their games exclusively on Google's App Store. In turn, Google promotes their games. It also promised to provide necessary support abroad so that the games get traction in foreign markets too. This practice went on from 2016 to 2018. In 2018, South Korea's Fair Trade Commission launched a probe against Google. The probe has now culminated with the regulator asking Google to pay up $32 million. Google's actions obviously hit One Store hard. One Store was unable to attract new games. There was a drop in sales between 2016 and 2018. And in the same period, Google's revenue in South Korea jumped to more than $13.5 billion. Google has denied the allegations of wrongdoing. It says it does not stop other platforms from competing with it. But the Fair Trade Commission is very sure of its case. It says it has internal memos, documents and emails that show Google indeed tried derailing One Store's business. This isn't the first time Google has been in the crosshairs of antitrust regulators. In fact, not even the first time in South Korea. Last year, Seoul imposed a $50 million fine on it. What for? For violating privacy laws and not informing users or obtaining their consent when collecting and analyzing behavioral information. In 2021, South Korea fined Google $177 million for abusing its dominance in the Android market. Google has faced a lot of heat in India too. This was last year when India fined the tech giant $162 million for anti-competitive practices. The Competition Commission of India said Google leveraged its dominant position. It used it to protect its products like Chrome and YouTube from competitors. Google has landed in trouble in Europe too. In fact, Europe is particularly rough terrain for Google. Last year, the company was fined 4.1 billion euros. Any guesses why? Again, it abused its dominance of the market by imposing unlawful restrictions on Android phone manufacturers and mobile networks. In 2018, Google was fined a whopping $5 billion in Europe. So Google has been facing heat world over for misusing its market dominance and weeding out competition. And this has been going on for years. Yet, Google refuses to stop the practice. Evidently, the fines are not working. Perhaps it's time for countries to rethink their approach to tackle Google.
Meanwhile, the US is coming under fire from allies for an old bad habit. America snoops on its friends. Yesterday, we told you about top secret documents that have been leaked. They showed which countries the US was snooping on: Ukraine, Israel, South Korea, the UAE, among others. Needless to say, they're not happy about it. The US is in damage control mode because it has a lot of damage to undo. America has been calling top officials in ally countries and telling them they should not be worried.
U.S. officials have been in touch with relevant allies and partners over the last couple of days at very high levels, and I'll leave it at that. So we're taking this very, very seriously. There is no excuse for these kinds of documents to be in the public domain. They don't deserve to be in the public domain. They deserve to be protected. So we're going to get to the bottom of this.
Two takeaways from what the White House has said on the matter. First, the US is in touch with its allies. And second, the problem is not the spying. The problem is the expose. How did it become public? That's what the US is really worried about. Remember, this is one of the worst leaks for the US in the 21st century. The last was perhaps in 2013, when Edward Snowden unleashed a storm by disclosing highly classified documents. America's allies are not amused, and they're saying it in so many words. We'll start with Israel. It is America's most important partner in West Asia. The leaked documents say that Israel's intelligence agency Mossad was behind the protests against Prime Minister Netanyahu. They also talk about how Israel could supply lethal aid to Ukraine. In response, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office has released a statement. It has called the claims mendacious and without any foundation whatsoever. Then we have Australia, another important partner of the US in the Indo-Pacific. This is what Australia had to say about the leaks.
The issue of maintaining the security of information is critical to the development of national capability and to the trust and confidence across allies and partners. And I appreciate that this, by reports, is a serious leak. It is being investigated seriously by US authorities, and they are engaging with partners in order to better understand the potential consequences of that information being released into the public.
That was the Chief of Australia's Defence Forces calling the leak a serious one. Australia is part of the Five Eyes intelligence community. The US, the UK, Canada and New Zealand are also the members. These are 5 countries, including Australia, of Five Eyes that share intelligence. All members have asked for briefings from Washington, D.C. and they're yet to get a concrete response. At least 2 of these countries are very concerned. One of them said, and I'm quoting, "We expect the US to share a damage assessment with us in the coming days, but we cannot wait for their assessment. Right now, we are doing our own." Another member was worried about the leak hurting Ukraine's interests. The leak talks about the war. It says the battle for Donbas region will be stuck in a stalemate throughout this year. It also details Ukraine's weaknesses and vulnerabilities. So while countries are measuring their public responses, they're privately quite frustrated with the Americans. South Korea, though, is an outlier. It says the leak will strengthen the alliance between US and South Korea. It's a strange line to take. Listen to this.
The 2 countries are an intelligence alliance. We closely cooperate in terms of intelligence activities on important issues. Therefore, we intend to take this incident as an opportunity to strengthen our trust and cooperative system.
South Korea also says the leaked US documents are largely fabricated. America itself does not agree. It says only some of the documents and not all may be fabricated. The opposition in South Korea is asking some serious questions. It has expressed strong regret over America's surveillance activities. Opposition leaders are calling it a clear violation of their national sovereignty. The US is in a position where it does not have answers to some very basic questions, questions which the UK, Germany, UAE and Ukraine and also the EU are asking. Like, how did these documents end up online? Who was responsible for this leak? And what is the US doing to remove this information from social media? Washington has no answers. But here's what reports say. Apparently, the documents were first leaked on a platform called Discord, in a chat room which is very popular with gamers. You heard that right. Highly classified US intelligence documents first landed in a chat room full of gamers. Then they got picked up by the media. And this has been going on for weeks, apparently. Nobody in the American security apparatus got a whiff of what was happening until a week ago. This is both concerning and embarrassing for the United States. This is hardly the first time when they've been caught red-handed spying on friends and allies. The US also spied on at least 3 French presidents from 2006 to 2012. In 2013, the US was accused of spying on former German Chancellor Angela Merkel. It was monitoring the Chancellor's phone calls for many years. Subsequent leaks revealed that several German politicians were also being spied on. And these are just the most recent instances. Washington has been into such shady activities for a long, long time, but the world is only now realizing the scale of American espionage. Meanwhile, the Wuhan virus is making a comeback in India. Cases continue to rise. Face masks and familiar words of caution are back in fashion. India saw more than 5,600 cases and 21 deaths in the last 24 hours. This is the highest tally in 7 months. Hospitals across the country carried out a mock drill today. It was to check the preparedness of the healthcare system. India's health ministry has asked people to remain vigilant. It has also requested states to ramp up testing. But why are cases going up now? And more importantly, should this surge worry you? Our next report has the answers.
The Wuhan virus is back in the news, and with that come the familiar terms: masks, sanitizing, social distancing. But why are we talking about it now? That's because India is seeing another spike in COVID cases. More than 5,600 cases and 21 deaths were reported in the last 24 hours. This is the highest tally in 7 months and a 79% rise in infections compared to last week. The total active cases in the country are at 37,093. Out of this, the southern state of Kerala alone has around 13,700 active cases. Maharashtra is second on the list, followed by Delhi. The number of cases started going up across India since last month. On March 1st, 240 fresh cases were reported. By April 11th, the figure ballooned to 5,600. While the rise in cases is being watched closely, officials say there's no reason to worry yet. They say most cases are mild and do not require hospitalization. India's Health Minister, Mansukh Mandavia, chaired a review meeting last week. This meeting was attended by health ministers of different states. The message was clear: stay alert and ramp up testing. A mock drill was held in several hospitals today. It was to check the preparedness in case cases go up further. As for the states, some have put restrictions in place, while some are adopting the wait-and-watch approach. Uttar Pradesh has instructed officials to screen international passengers at airports. Kerala and Haryana have made masks compulsory in public. Senior citizens and those with comorbidities have been asked to take extra precautions. But what explains the current rise? Some experts say it's due to the weather change and a rise in influenza cases.
So this is the time of the year when the weather changes and we will see respiratory viral infections increasing. Both we have seen increase in influenza H3 and 2 and also increase in COVID cases, which is also a respiratory viral infection. As long as these viral infections are not causing a huge surge in hospital admissions and deaths, I think we just need to have a good surveillance program in place.
But that's not all. There's a new variant in town as well. A new variant of the Wuhan virus. It was first detected in February this year. For context, 3 separate variants of the virus have driven infections in India in the past. These led to 3 different waves. In 2020, the Alpha variant was the dominant one. In 2021, it was the Delta variant. And in 2022, it was the Omicron variant. The latest variant is a subtype of Omicron. It's said to be more infectious and highly transmissible. The symptoms, however, largely remain the same: high fever, sore throat, severe headache, and body pain. Children, elderly, and those with comorbidities like heart problems have been advised to mask up when stepping out. That leaves us with vaccines, the most potent weapon against the virus. India undertook the world's largest vaccination drive in 2021. So far, more than 220 crore doses have been administered. Waning immunity from the vaccine is also said to have played a part in the spike. So should this spike in cases worry you? Yes and no. Yes, if you aren't taking precautions. What precautions? Masks, social distancing, and sanitizing. And no, if you are. After all, the virus is known to thrive on carelessness.
Water, water everywhere, not a drop to drink. There's a good chance you heard this line before by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. If someone's talking about water scarcity, they will probably mention it. It's about time we also talked about it. Water scarcity refers to a situation where water demand exceeds its supply. You already know that water occupies 70% of the earth, but only about 3% of this is fresh water. And out of this, only 1.2% can be used as drinking water. And the worst part is this: we're quickly running out of that too. In 2016, a study said, for most of the world, the era of cheap and plentiful drinking water has passed. But here's what this line does not say. This doesn't apply to the rich, because their swimming pools continue to sparkle like emeralds scattered across their vast properties. Their lush green gardens remain well watered. Their fast cars are always clean and shiny. And with this, they're driving water crises in cities.
We suffer due to the lack of water. Many times we don't wash our own clothes and they remain dirty for months. We have neighbors who give us water.
पुरुषों को तो क्या है कि वो तो नहा धो के सब ड्यूटी पे अपना काम शुरू हो जाता है। वो दिक्कत तो औरतों को आती थी ज़्यादा, तो घर का काम, पानी की सारी समस्या तो औरतों को आती है। बर्तन धोना पानी से, कपड़े धोना पानी से, हर चीज़ की समस्या पानी औरतों को ही आती है।
Water is the best insurance you can have. There is nothing without water. There is no vegetation.
In other words, what is the cost of fancy infinity pools? A drained groundwater system, thousands going thirsty, and the lack of basic sanitation facilities for many. The rich enjoy the benefits of water, while the poor pay for them. And this is according to a recent study. It used South Africa's Cape Town as a case study. The richest people here use 50 times more water than the poorest. They've suffered several years of drought, and when the day zero crisis struck, the poorest were left without water for their very basic needs. Day zero refers to the day when a city's taps run completely dry. In India, Day Zero famously claimed Chennai as a victim in 2019. But Cape Town is not a unique case. If we look back at data since 2000, the year 2000, 80 big cities have experienced similar circumstances, 80 cities, like extreme drought and water shortage. But it rarely touches the rich. This includes cities like Bengaluru, Barcelona, Miami, Melbourne, London, Sao Paulo, Beijing, and Harare. So why is this happening? Because the rich and the poor use water very differently. Most of the water used by the wealthy is for non-basic needs. They also use starkly different quantities. Like in Cape Town, 14% of the city's richest used 51% of the water. The poorest used only 27%. But solutions looking to tackle water shortage often overlook this. They focus on ways to increase supply or prices of water. But the only way to protect water supply is probably to redistribute it more equally, because the situation is already dire. 2 billion people the world over do not have safe drinking water services. 3.6 billion people don't have proper sanitation services, and 2.3 billion lack basic hand washing facilities. And this crisis is going from bad to worse. Water inequality is growing. The rich are getting richer and the poor grow poorer. But ultimately, everyone will suffer the consequences, because climate change is looming large and the world population is growing. So while demand grows, predictions say it will outstrip supply by 40% in the year 2030. And 1 billion city dwellers will face water shortages in the near future. So what's the long and short of this story? When it comes to water, we have to stop going with the flow. We must change tack and, most of all, learn how to share. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. We're starting with one of Russia's most active volcanoes. It erupted this morning, shooting a vast cloud of ash. Villages were smothered by volcanic dust. In South Korea, there have been wildfires. Hundreds of firefighters have been mobilized to contain them, but strong winds and dry weather are making matters worse. In Northern Ireland, a number of masked people attacked a police vehicle in Londonderry. They threw petrol bombs. This is ahead of US President Joe Biden's visit to Belfast. And finally, we'll take you back in history. What happened on the 11th of April? In 2003, US and Kurdish forces took Iraq's third city of Mosul. They did so without a fight. Images show them sealing victory in the north. We're leaving you with this. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Dynamism is required, whether in politics or whether in part of life, and therefore people come and people go, and the BJP is an institution. It is not a family run party where only one family has a privilege. Now, having said that, let me come to a couple of points. There's double speak on the part of my good friend Aishwarya. If they are so confident of winning, here is a statement of MB Patil, and I hope she knows who MB Patil is. We expect SDPI should support the Congress to defeat the BJP. They need to go on the clutches of a party like SDPI. They want to play the religious reservation card, and Ms. Aishwarya just now said that she was against our policy where we have given the 2% to Vokaligas and 2% to Lingayats after cancelling a religious reservation which is unconstitutional. So is the Congress saying on record that it is against the idea of extending reservations, further more reservations to Vokaligas and to Lingayats? This is the hatreds they've had for the Lingayat Samaj and for the other Samaj time and again. And OBC Samaj, you talking about OBC, the first OBC Prime Minister of this country who continued and finished his tenure and got a second tenure in this country was Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Shehzad, in terms of the big takeaway I think that's coming through is some of the veteran leaders, Jagdish Shettar, Ishwarappa, Arvind Limbavali's name is also doing the rounds, have all been asked not to contest, or they've been basically retired, or in your parlance they've been asked to move to the Margdarshak Mandal.
Speculation is most dangerous when it seems easiest. I'll let the party announce it. And anyways, we are an institutional party. We are not a parivarik party that I would be privy to this. There's an institution in our party. Mr. Dharmendra Pradhan has just described how the institution collects the feedback from every level, and therefore it takes a certain amount of time. If it was a one parivar party or a two parivar party, maybe the tickets, and even then in Hassan we are seeing what is happening. But anyway, let me not get sidetracked. The idea is that we have seen in the last 10 elections pro-incumbency because of the double engine sarkar of the centre and the state. That is what we are seeing in Karnataka. Highest FDI received by our government in Karnataka. 45% of the entire FDI of the country has come to Karnataka. The fact is that 53 lakh farmers have benefited from the Kisan Samman Nidhi. The fact is that 40 lakh plus people have got toilets. You've got 32 lakh gas cylinder connections being given. You had a trajectory of growth, whereas 6.2% growth during their tenure, it's 9.5%. Agriculture has grown, and all of these stories are now being reflected in our pro-incumbency story. On one hand, we have a double engine, and on the other hand, Aishwarya's party has double trouble. They don't, even before the power spoils have come to them, which it won't, they have started fighting over the seat. And look at their candidates. One of them is a person who's been accused number one in murder. Another one is somebody who had a role in defeating Mr. Khadge. So you have double engine versus double trouble. And therefore, Aishwarya seems very keen on grabbing media narratives. But on the ground, it's not.
Double engine versus double trouble is what Shehzad is saying. Aishwarya Mahadev, 189 candidates will be released today. The names will be released. That's as much. In fact, I think it's a little more than what the Congress has already released. Yeah.
Good evening, Zaka. I think even with all the facts that Shehzad rattled off, very good, impressive reading, of course, but none of that is going to save them on the ground because whether you like it or not, Prime Minister Modi cannot save them, one. And second, it has not been double engine Sarkar whatsoever, whether it's the fact that 865 villages of Karnataka being claimed by the BJP coalition in Maharashtra, whether it's the fact that GST dues are still pending. You saw your own Chief Minister Yediyurappa cry for flood relief. You're seeing the scam and the sham.
Hello and welcome to the late night edition with me, Ayushman Singh Jamwal. Our top story: there is fresh trouble brewing within the Rajasthan unit of the Congress party. Congress leader Sachin Pilot staged a day-long dharna against Rajasthan Chief Minister Ashok Gehlot. Pilot has alleged that the Gehlot government has not taken action in corruption cases against BJP leader and former Chief Minister Vasundhara Raje Scindia. Sachin Pilot has termed this as a fight against corruption, while the party high command gave him a warning, calling the dharna action against the party. Sachin Pilot ignored the warning and went ahead with the dharna. In fact, Rajasthan Chief Minister Ashok Gehlot refused to react and instead pushed his social welfare agenda. But that did not stop members of his camp from calling out the Congress MLA. After his open rebellion in July 2020 and Ashok Gehlot openly calling him a Gaddar, the present dharna by Sachin Pilot is indeed his political assertion ahead of the Rajasthan Assembly elections. Is this the beginning of a fresh storm that could lead to a split within the Rajasthan Congress?
राजस्थान की पिछली सरकार जो वसुंधरा जी की सरकार थी, उस सरकार में तमाम जो भ्रष्टाचार हुआ, करप्शन हुआ, उसके विरोध में आज एक दिन का मैंने अनशन रखा था.
Congress MLA and former Rajasthan Deputy Chief Minister Sachin Pilot sat on a day-long hunger strike in Jaipur. The target of his protest was rival and Chief Minister Ashok Gehlot. Pilot accused him of not acting on corruption cases during the previous BJP regime of Vasundhara Raje.
हम लोग कांग्रेस में विपक्ष में थे, तो हम सब लोगों ने बहुत सारे स्कैंडल्स और करप्शन के मामलों को उजागर किया था, प्रमाण के सहित. करप्शन के खिलाफ हमारी जीरो टॉलरेंस की पॉलिसी है. एक साल से ज्यादा पहले मैंने प्रदेश की सरकार और आदरणीय मुख्यमंत्री जी को लिखित में कहा था.
Pilot went ahead with his dharna despite a clear warning from the Congress that the move will be seen as anti-party activity.
जो भी बात है वो घर में होनी चाहिए ना, घर से बाहर नहीं होनी चाहिए. अब आप मुझसे पूछ रहे हो तो वो भी मैं वही गलती करूं जो कोई और कर रहा है, मैं भी आपसे बात करूं, वो बात नहीं करनी चाहिए. अगर मेरे मन में कोई बात होगी तो मैं मुख्यमंत्री जी से अवश्य मिलूंगा, कहूंगा.
The absence of any Congress logo or branding at the protest site further drove speculation that Pilot is on his way out of the party.
The senior leaders, including that of General Secretary of the Congress Party, Priyanka Gandhi Vadra, she reached out to Sachin Pilot when asked to him. Sachin Pilot, he refused to comment on the same, whether anyone has gotten in touch with him or not. But yes, he also said that some kind of action was said this morning by the in charge of the Congress Party for the state of Rajasthan.
Soon after Pilot sat on his dharna, Gehlot released a video listing his government's welfare policies.
मेरे प्यारे प्रदेशवासियों, मैंने तय किया है कि साल 2030 तक मुझे राजस्थान को देश का नंबर 1 राज्य बनाना है. राहत बजट वाले बजट में मैंने ऐसी योजना बनाई है जो किसी दूसरे राज्य में नहीं है.
The move by Pilot to open a new front against Gehlot is seen as an attempt to pressure Congress's high command to resolve the leadership issue ahead of assembly elections in Rajasthan later this year.
राजस्थान ने कांग्रेस को अवसर दिया सेवा करने का, लेकिन 4 साल से लगातार सत्ता की लड़ाई ही चल रही है. और जैसे मैंने कहा कि ये कांग्रेस की रीति रही है, divide and rule.
This is not the first time that Pilot has gone against the Gehlot government. In 2020, he and 18 other rebel MLAs defied a whip and did not attend Congress's legislature party meeting. While some in the Congress have advised against taking any action against Pilot, will the Rajasthan Desert Storm swallow Congress's chances in the assembly polls?
Discipline has to be there. There are no two things about that, and the more you compromise on that, the more difficult it sometimes becomes. But then it should not be a one-off thing. This sense of discipline and the imposition of discipline should be a continuum. As far as this particular issue is concerned, I really don't know much about it. We have been hearing in the media that Sachin Pilot is going to sit on a fast for some time, for a day. And late last night, I believe there was a directive from the party in charge that he should not sit on the fast. It will be seen as anti-party, something against the government.
Okay.
And also that the in charge, Rajasthan AICC in charge is in touch with Sachin Pilot, and that Sachin is an asset for the party, is a big asset for the party. So that sort of sends a message that there needs to be restraint, and I don't know what stand eventually the party will take as far as disciplining is concerned.
But do you believe, Mr. Deo, that this episode is in a sense symbolic of the fact that there are individual leaders in the Congress party, whether it is Mr. Pilot or yourself, whose ambitions, whose aspirations the party is not able to accommodate, or it's just simply unwilling to change, it's happy with the existing status quo, and therefore people like Mr. Pilot and yourself are left with no other option but to resort to measures like this?
It is not only just us. Frankly, there is no party that I know of which doesn't have some sort of differences between leaders or let us say members of the party. Not one party. You start from Bengal and you can go to Odisha, you can go to Jharkhand, you can go to Bihar, you can go to Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand, you can go down south to the AIDMK episode, you can come up to Maharashtra with the Shiv Sena, you can see Madhya Pradesh with Jyotiraditya Scindia leaving the party. So there is no single party which is not afflicted by this sort of a situation. It is very tough to manage, extremely tough to manage individuals of some presence in their various fields of political activity, and that is what parties try to do.
All right. One final word
from
you, Mr. Deo. Whether it's in Mr. Pilot's case or in your case, we're given to understand that certain assurances were given to you by the leadership, and obviously those assurances have not been kept. So is it that the Congress leadership does not want to keep its end of the bargain, or it's just happy with the existing status quo? And what may that mean for people like you and Mr. Pilot, who I don't think it's a crime to have ambition in a political party?
Ambitions, aspirations, they will be there in every field of life, every walk of life, whether it is journalism, whether it is the TV channel that you represent, whether it is a business company, whether it is a professionally managed business company. There is no walk of life where there would not be aspirations. And it is extremely, I think it is very healthy to have aspirations, that is fine.
Okay.
The matter is about disciplining. You talked about what had been decided or what had been talked about. I am not really free to mention that. Whatever transpires between closed doors, one has to maintain its dignity. Nobody has from the party spoken about it openly, so I am not in a position to speak about that.
And more breaking news coming in after his dharna. Sachin Pilot is heading to the national capital now. As of now, no meetings have been fixed. So that's the piece of breaking news that's coming in. Sachin Pilot is heading to the national capital. What we are learning is that it's for some personal work, but as of now, no meetings have been fixed. I'm joined by Pallavi Ghosh on the broadcast, who's getting us the twists and turns in this desert storm that has rocked the Congress party. Pallavi, give us the details.
So he's coming expectedly for a day or two, and as of now, no meeting has been fixed with the top leadership. What we were told is largely coming in for some personal work, but he'll be here in the national capital for the next 2 days, which means that there's a possibility he has a meeting with the top leadership. There have been 2 points of view. Sachin Pilot insisting that he never attacked Ashok Gehlot. It's more about corruption in Vasundhara Scindia in a poll-bound state. The Central Congress leadership, at least a part of it, Ayushman, has not seen it too kindly. We saw that statement which was issued accusing him of anti-party activity. So the moot point over here is, will any disciplinary action be taken against him. Again, we are told that there are many who feel that this is not the right time because he raised the issue of corruption in the Vasudha India government. And, the Congress facing all those exits should actually look at keeping the flock together and let this pass.
Right. Thank you, Pallavi, for getting us that piece of breaking news. So, Sachin Pilot heading to the national capital after he has miffed the Congress top brass when it comes to that day-long dharna against Ashok Gehlot. So, the rumblings continue within the Rajasthan Congress right ahead of the state elections. Now, meanwhile, party leaders are confident that this impasse will be resolved. This is what Congress leader Prithviraj Chavan told News 18.
Will you be able to repeat your performance in Rajasthan?
No, I don't know about